it's delineating creative time and technical time, and I find that really works for me. Initially, I'm probably just going to send the drums to 2 channels. I may end up splitting them out individually to their own channel, but this is just to get a basic mix going to start with. At the moment, they're going into the stereo channels because that's how it was done when I was tracking. So you can see this goes to 19 and 20. I'm actually going to change that to 5 and 6. Probably just out of habit. I know that that's where I put my bass, so I don't even have to label it up on the console because I know that that's where I always put it. My vocal always goes on 9 and 10. I've got 2 guitars, so I'm actually going to put them on different places. My guitars usually go on 13 and 14. I know it's sad, it's part of my life. And then I'll put the other guitar on 15 and 16. There's not loads going on in this. We've got drums, bass, 2 guitars, 1 vocal, and then there's some backing vocal tracks, but the guys didn't actually sing any backing vocals. They may end up being used for room mics. We will see. I actually made a note here, drum parallel on Pete, the bass player's mic, because he was right next to the drum kit, so smashing that up with a compressor might end up sounding good. The effects that are in here are the ones that we used during the tracking session, probably for playback for the band. So when the band come in, I like to, present a fairly, good sounding thing. So you can see that when I've already used some effects on the vocal to start with, I've already compressed the bass a little bit, and I've applied some sidechain compression from the kick. The sidechain compressor, basically that means that when the bass drum plays, the signal of the bass guitar is ducked a little bit, and that just, it tucks them together. I've already done that previously. But, when the guys were here, when they were listening back, a lot of this stuff comes in on templates as I'm recording. So I have a lot of effects and buses all set up in my template, ready to go. So you can see that these SSLs, and if I enable it, it comes up. So that was on the channel before I've done anything, because I start with my template and I bring these tracks in before we even start recording or anything. You might think it's daft using the SSL plugin when I've actually got E-Series EQs on the console. I don't really favour one over the other, so although that does seem crazy, it seems crazy to me now when I'm saying it. Using the plugin though is completely recallable, and if you get the impression that people are going to want things to be recalled over and over again, the plugin's really, really good. The sound of the EQ on the console, it is slightly different to the plugin. All the analog gear sounds slightly different to the plugins, but it's not to say that the plugins are bad. The plugins are just, it's just a different thing. They're just more tools to use. The top guys, not me, but the top guys are using all of this stuff. They're not fixating themselves to one way of working. They just use the right tool for the scenario. I use the EQs on the console tons as I'm recording, so hopefully if I've got the recording right, I shouldn't have to use much EQ as I mix. A lot of what I will be doing mixing will be riding levels on the faders, mixing, that's in my eyes what mixing is. So I'll be riding the faders on the S1. I've got an Avid S1. I'll be getting the effects ready, and I will just be, tidying up the starts and the ends of the tunes, making sure that everything sits right. Some of these guitars, I was a little bit conscious that one of the guitarists had a little bit much distortion on at one point, but I did take a DI at the time, so what I will probably do is add in something like the Helix Native, a plug-in amplifier, and I'll add in a little bit of clean sound to his sound, and that'll allow me to place him in the stereo field differently as well, which is why I've sent these two guitars to two different stereo channels. I can pan them differently then. The other thing that I'm going to do now, I'm just going to bring in some more stuff from my template. I have a kick sample, I have a snare sample. I might not use them. This kick snare crush I don't need because I actually recorded a kick snare crush from my DBX 560 as I was doing it. The drum bus is already there. Yep, that's cool. I've already brought in my bass parallel track. I must have done that whilst we were recording. I'm going to bring in a Guitar One Helix, and then I will bring in a few more effects. So I've already got my lead vocal plate, my delay that I use. I've got a memory man, which is another delay. I've got a whole reverb that I like. So it's just thinking about what else I will probably need. So I'll probably need a chamber. I do need chorus for one of the tunes. I've made a note of that the guitarist wanted me to add some chorus on one of the tunes. I'll probably use the micro shift on the vocal to give that a bit of a thickening. Oh yeah, I think I'll just bring in my other plate, and I'm going to bring in my spring reverb as well. Now, it might seem like overkill to bring all these effects in, but the computer's fine. It's not going to struggle to do any of this. It's not going to struggle with the workload of having these plugins. And I can always disable, you see, when they come in, most of these plugins are inactive as they come in. That's how they come in from the template. They're inactive in the template. But the way I see it is it's going back to the stav book. All of this boring stuff is now done, so I don't have to think about it. And it's very similar to if I'm working analog in the studio and I'm like, oh, maybe I should use this compressor because it's there and you see it. You know, oh, you know, I've not EQ'd the vocal yet, you know, because you see it on the desk. So similarly, I've got this all in my template ready to go here as well. So it's like I start thinking about something, maybe the guitars aren't sitting the way that I want them to, and I see the spring reverb thing and I think, oh, why don't I try that, see how that sounds. If I'm in the middle of mixing something, I don't have to suddenly stop and think, oh, what am I going to do now? What should I bring in? Oh, should I, you know, and they start like scrolling. I mean, my plugin list is ridiculous as well. So if I start scrolling through all my plugins while I'm mixing, I'll never get any work done. I do that on other days, you know, so if I have a day experimenting on my own, or if my mate Ben comes round to mess around with something, or my mate Gaz comes over, and we just mess around with stuff. And so I try and keep that separate as well, which again, it comes back to this thing in that book, Mixing With Your Mind. It's delineating creative time and technical time. And I find that really works for me. If you're interested, do please give the video a like. If you want me to do any other content, please do leave a comment below and let me know if there's anything that you wanted explaining about anything that I've said.